Everybody, I hope and pray that you're doing well today. So we come to our word from the word, and today that word is fake. Fake. Now, we've talked about before in our prayer lives that we have to be careful that we're being sincere and not being fake. And one of the things that we're going to see today, and then throughout this week, as we're still in First Samuel, and we're kind of we'll see a transition, how the transition is going to happen between Saul and then moving on to King David. But as we talked about, ended out last week talking about the fact that Saul was rejected as king. And here in First Samuel chapter 15, even as I alluded to this yesterday in our sermon on Joel, talking about how obedience is more important than sacrifice. And it's this kind of the same thing that we see going on here today. Now, as far as this goes along with prayer, here is you find a disobedience on Saul's part. And it's as if he says, well, we had good intentions. We were going to bring this and sacrifice it to the Lord. And I think sometimes if we're not careful, we'll do the same thing in our prayer lives. So let's look at the scripture today. 1 Samuel chapter 15, looking at verses 13 through 16. It says, Then Samuel went to Saul, and Saul said to him, Blessed are you of the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord. But Samuel said, What then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears, and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? And Saul said, They have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God. And the rest we have utterly destroyed. Then Samuel said to Saul, Be quiet, and I will tell you what the Lord said to me last night. And he said to him, Speak on. And I pray, as always, you're looking at all these passages and had already maybe even read through chapter 15. And this is all what Samuel's getting ready to tell him is how he's been rejected as king. But the reason that he says, well, wait a minute, what is this bleating of sheep, right? What is this noise that I hear of these animals all around? And he says, well, these are the ones that we spared so that we could sacrifice them to the Lord. And this is the conversation just further down in verses 22 and 23 when Samuel tells him that obedience was better than sacrifice. See, God had told them and told Saul to utterly destroy everything, to not leave anything out. And so whatever Saul's intentions were, and it very well could be that this is what we're going to do to sacrifice to the Lord. I believe a lot of that falls back into those rituals that they were doing. Kind of like we talked about from Joel chapter 2 yesterday, how we might tear our garments in mourning over sin, but if our hearts are not changed, then nothing has really changed. Nothing has really been accomplished. And I wrote down this thought, good intentioned disobedience is still disobedience. Saul does he does some things right, but he does a lot of things wrong. Now, at the same time, we know at this point he's already been rejected as king, and we'll see how you'll see in the coming days, if you're reading, we're going to deal all the way through chapter 20 this week. You'll see that God kind of removes his hand from Saul, and he is troubled by an evil spirit instead. And we'll see a drastic change in the way that he's behaving. So I can't say that he really even had the best of intentions with this disobedience here. I think his disobedience was still with the idea that I can win God's favor by sacrificing these animals, when all God wanted him to do was just be obedient. So many times in our prayer lives, it's like we come to the Lord with this attitude of, everything is, I'm making sure that everything looks to be a certain way, but it's as if we're trying to fool God. It's prayer that's wrapped in charades, wrapped in a costume almost, instead of being wrapped, as we said, just to use even yesterday's sermon, if we're wrapping it like that and not with a tattered heart, if we've got the tattered clothes and we're making a good show of everything, but our prayer is not sincere, this would be as if, I've used this illustration before. I'll never forget was sitting down at one time at work, and a gentleman had bowed his head to pray over just a little small snack of food that he had. On the outside, that looks great. But when he lifted up his eyes, one of the first things that came out of his mouth was a curse word. Do you think that the intentions were right in his prayer? Or do you think he was just checking off a box? Now, I'm not the judge, but we are to be fruit inspectors, right? And this is something, what do you believe that unbelievers sitting around were thinking at that moment? But that's not just pointing out others. I have to look at myself those times where I'm praying. Am I just putting on a show, or am I praying sincerely? And today I pray and I beg you to look into your own heart, into your own prayer life. Would God be looking to you and say, well, I believe that prayer was fake? Or would he hear the prayer that sincerely came from your heart? Something definitely to think about today. God bless you, and I pray you have a great, great day.